The war has already begun. Not with bombs or bloodshed, but with silence, confusion, and distraction. And the battlefield isn't out there somewhere. It's in your body, on your plate, inside your mind. This isn't just about what you eat. It's about what survives in you when the world starts collapsing. Chosen one, listen closely. The days ahead will not make room for the average. There is a spiritual famine coming, disguised as a feast. Everything that once seemed safe, sacred, or satisfying will be exposed for what it truly is. Poison, not just to the body, but to the soul. The enemy isn't hiding anymore. He's feeding people disobedience dressed up as dinner. But God has issued a holy command to his remnant, a divine instruction that is not about trend, diet, or fear. It is about survival, alignment, power. And if you're hearing this now, it's not by coincidence. You've been summoned by name. This is Chosen One's sanctuary, and heaven has a message for you. The instruction is clear. Only 3 foods have been declared spiritually clean in this season. Only 3 carry the vibration of divine obedience: rice, beans, salmon. Everything else carries a frequency of confusion, decay, or death. That's not speculation. That's alignment with what Scripture has always shown. God gives clear instructions before he moves. Before the flood, Noah built. Before the famine, Joseph stored. Before the deliverance, Moses fasted. And now, before the next shaking, you are being told how to eat. This is your sign. This is your survival strategy. This is your prophetic invitation to step out of the fog and into divine clarity. Stay with me until the end, because what I'm about to reveal isn't just about food. It's about your fire. It's about your clarity. It's about the calling that's been buried under years of toxic distractions. If you're ready to be rebuilt for what's coming, let's begin. The hidden war behind the fork. There is a war raging that most never see, because it's not fought with bullets or blood, but with cravings, chemicals, and quiet compromises. This is the war for your temple. The body you live in was never meant to be a trash bin for processed lies and spiritual sedatives. Yet every aisle, every ad, every bite has become a doorway, either into divine clarity or deeper captivity. The food placed before you in this age isn't just about taste. It is spiritual programming, engineered confusion, and frequency distortion wrapped in flavor. The chosen ones are not just under attack through culture and ideology, but through what enters their mouth daily. This war is hidden because it looks like dinner, but it's real because it rewires your discernment, delays your destiny, and dulls your divine fire. The enemy has always known that to silence a prophet, you don't have to bind their mouth. You just have to bind their body. Feed them compromise. Fill them with fatigue. Poison their focus. He doesn't fear your dreams. He fears your energy to walk them out. The strategy is ancient. In Genesis, the serpent didn't use a sword. He used food. He knew that if he could corrupt the appetite, he could corrupt the assignment. Today, that same strategy wears new clothes. Genetically modified foods, hormone-drenched meat, seedless fruit stripped of divine design. These are not just health concerns. They are prophetic alarms. And if you ignore them, the cost is more than sickness. It is spiritual silence, a dull heart, a drifting purpose. You'll wonder why you can't hear God clearly anymore, why the visions feel blurry, why your prayers feel heavy. But the truth is, you've been slowly unplugged by what looked harmless. This is not paranoia. This is precision. This is discernment for those who know they've been marked for something greater, because when your temple is compromised, your transmission is scrambled. But when your temple is clean, the voice of God is unmistakable. And that brings us to the 3 sacred foods, divinely preserved and spiritually aligned, awaiting your obedience like keys to the door you've been praying to open. The 3 foods of alignment: rice, beans, salmon. God never complicates what He anoints. What He assigns is often wrapped in simplicity, hidden in plain sight, so only those with spiritual eyes will recognize the treasure. In a world chasing exotic superfoods and synthetic energy, heaven whispers 3 sacred names: rice, beans, and salmon. Not trendy, not glamorous, but chosen. These are not ordinary meals. They are instruments of alignment, carrying divine frequency, ancient memory, and prophetic fuel. To the unawakened, they look like groceries. But to the chosen ones, they are holy provisions in a time of famine. Rice is the grain of the humble. It grounds your spirit and brings the rhythm of rest back into your body. In every culture where spiritual endurance was required, rice has remained. It grows in stillness, thrives in flood, and multiplies in surrender, just like the life of the obedient. Beans are the quiet builders. Rich in strength, rooted in the earth, they repair the inner temple cell by cell. They speak of resilience and regeneration, of the slow, holy process of becoming whole again. And salmon, heaven's flame in flesh. It swims upstream, defying the current like the chosen ones who refuse to be carried by culture. Its oils feed the brain, ignite vision, awaken prophetic perception. These are not empty calories. They are messages in molecular form. Scripture reminds us that God's instructions about food have always carried spiritual significance. Daniel rejected the king's portion, not out of arrogance, but alignment. He chose vegetables and water, and the result was divine clarity and favor 10 times greater than the rest. His diet became a doorway to revelation. In the same way, your obedience to these 3 foods is not a diet. It is a declaration, a holy agreement that says, I choose clarity over convenience. I choose purpose over pleasure. I choose obedience over noise. Ignore this instruction, and the cost is not just in your body, but in your destiny. You will move, but without direction. Pray, but without fire. You'll feel the weight of spiritual lethargy and not know why. But those who align will be sustained. They will see through the fog, stand through the famine, and carry power while others collapse. Because when you eat what heaven has assigned, you don't just survive, you sharpen, you activate, you remember who you are. And from this sacred place of alignment, the deeper patterns begin to emerge, echoes from Scripture that prove this instruction is not new. It is ancient, and it's always been the path of the called. Biblical echoes, when food became salvation. Throughout Scripture, divine instruction has always preceded divine intervention. When God prepares to move, He first prepares a people, and that preparation often begins with food. Not as a ritual, but as a test of obedience, as a blueprint for survival, as a sacred signpost that the shift has already begun. When the flood was coming, God gave Noah more than a warning. He gave him a list: animals, grains, storage. It wasn't panic. It was prophetic logistics. Noah didn't survive the flood by faith alone, but by obedient preparation. Joseph saw the famine in Pharaoh's dream, but it was his decision to store grain that saved nations. He wasn't just managing food. He was stewarding prophecy. Esther didn't rush into the king's chamber without first fasting. She aligned her body before she could carry her assignment. These are not old stories. They are living mirrors. God has always fed his chosen differently, because their mission is different. Their calling is heavier. Their endurance must be supernatural. The Israelites in the wilderness were given manna, daily, divine, mysterious. And when they craved meat and demanded something different, it came at a cost. The quail fell. So did many of them. Because when you reject God's provision, you open the door to spiritual pollution. Even something that looks like a blessing becomes a burden when taken outside of God's timing or intention. The pattern is clear. The chosen are called to eat according to revelation, not appetite. And today, that revelation is rising again. But this time, it's not in the wilderness. It's in the chaos of modern systems collapsing. The store shelves are full, but the spirit behind them is empty. The world is shouting louder, but heaven is speaking clearer. You are being given the same opportunity as Noah, Joseph, and Esther. Not to panic, but to prepare. Not to follow the crowd, but to listen to the cloud. Rice, beans, and salmon may seem too simple to save you, but that's exactly how God works, taking what is overlooked and turning it into a lifeline. These foods are not random. They are sacred threads in the larger tapestry of divine survival. And when you begin to eat with understanding, you realize this isn't about what's on your plate. It's about what God is building inside of you. Because the body he's preparing is for something greater than endurance. It's for revelation. And that revelation is hidden not just in visions or dreams, but in the very creation you consume. The technology of heaven is embedded in nature. God does not need machines to deliver miracles. He speaks in seeds. He heals through leaves. He rewires the body not with formulas from labs, but with frequencies from the soil and the sea. The foods he assigns are not just nutrients. They are sacred technologies, encoded with intelligence that your spirit recognizes before your mind understands. Rice is more than grain. It is stability made edible. It grows in silence, in flooded fields, teaching the body how to root itself in peace while the world drowns in noise. Spiritually, rice carries the rhythm of surrender. It doesn't fight the water. It flourishes in it. And so does the soul that trusts God in unstable times. Each grain carries the memory of stillness, grounding your scattered energy back into divine rhythm. Beans are the architects of repair. They don't just nourish, they rebuild. Every cell they touch begins to regenerate, especially the gut, the seat of intuition and immune strength. But even beyond the body, beans carry a frequency of covenant. In ancient cultures, they were offerings, symbols of agreement and continuity. Spiritually, they remind you that growth doesn't have to be fast to be faithful. That strength often grows underground before it shows in the light. And then there is salmon, the sacred flame of the waters. Unlike other fish, salmon swim against the current, returning to the place of their birth to release life. That's the chosen path. Unnatural, uncomfortable, but unstoppable. Salmon are saturated with omega oils that light the brain like candles in a cathedral. They don't just reduce inflammation, they ignite divine clarity. With every bite, your mind sharpens, your dreams brighten, your spiritual antenna stretches further into heaven's frequency. This is not health talk. This is revelation. These foods are not just good for you. They are aligned with you. Formed in creation before you ever took your first breath. designed to walk with you into your divine assignment. The way they grow, the way they heal, the way they nourish, it mirrors the journey of the chosen ones. And here lies the danger. If you replace these technologies with lab-born substitutions, you're not just switching ingredients. You're switching frequencies. You disconnect from what was meant to sustain your calling. You invite confusion into the temple. You confuse heaven's blueprint. But when you return to what was assigned, you return to what was written in your cells, your purpose, your path. Because God's technology doesn't just feed you. It awakens you. It brings order where there was chaos, peace where there was pressure, and light where there was fog. And that's why the attack is so strong. Because if you awaken, you become dangerous to the darkness. The enemy doesn't fear your knowledge. He fears your alignment. He fears the chosen ones who remember that their power has always come from the one who encoded truth not just in scrolls, but in soil. Consequences of eating outside of divine alignment. Every act of disobedience begins as a dismissal of something small, a whisper ignored, a prompting delayed, a divine instruction treated like a suggestion. And nowhere is this more dangerous than in the realm of food. Because when you eat outside of divine alignment, you don't just offend your health, you unravel your spiritual foundation. You dull the sword you were meant to wield. Modern food systems are not neutral. They are calculated distractions, engineered to sedate the spirit while satisfying the flesh. They do not nourish, they numb. The vibrant colors in the packages are a mask. Behind them lie chemicals, genetic manipulations, and spiritual death masquerading as convenience. What enters through your mouth does not stay in your stomach. It seeps into your bloodstream, into your cells, into your mind, and finally, into your decisions. The chosen ones cannot afford that kind of compromise. Because your assignment demands precision, you are not called to drift. You are called to discern. But when your body is flooded with synthetic energy and hormone-laced trauma, you lose the edge. You confuse noise for intuition. You chase impulse instead of direction. And slowly, without even realizing it, you stop hearing God clearly. This is how many miss their window. They don't fall from disobedience overnight. They drift from clarity until they no longer recognize the warning signs, until their fire becomes smoke, until their discernment becomes doubt. And all the while, the source sits silently on their plate, whispering compromise with every bite. But God, in His mercy, is exposing the silent thief. He is illuminating what has long been tolerated, because He loves His chosen ones too much to let them sleep through the storm. And the instruction is clear. Return to obedience, not out of fear, but because your purpose cannot afford delay. Your mission cannot afford confusion. Your gifts cannot grow in polluted soil. If you continue to feed yourself what was never assigned to you, you will begin to misidentify who you are. The chosen one becomes the confused one. The anointed become the anxious. But those who return, those who cleanse the altar and restore the diet, will feel their clarity return like breath after drowning. And once the fog lifts, you'll remember what power feels like. You'll remember what hearing God sounds like. And you'll begin to see the mark of divine separation showing up not just in your spirit, but in your body, your energy, and your ability to carry the weight of heaven's call. Obedience as the mark of the new Exodus. In every generation, God has marked His people, not with fame, not with force, but with obedience. Not the kind that impresses crowds, but the kind that shifts destinies. And now, in this age of noise, speed, and spiritual apathy, The mark has returned, but it looks different. This time, it's not blood on doorposts. It's obedience in the kitchen, faith on the fork, discipline in the unseen. The new Exodus is not away from Egypt. It is away from the systems that keep your spirit dull and your purpose delayed. It is a spiritual migration out of mass programming and into divine clarity. You are not wandering through wilderness now. You are walking through marketplaces filled with counterfeit provision. You are walking past shelves filled with food that was designed to keep your fire low. And heaven is watching how you choose. Obedience has always been the gate to preservation. When the plagues hit Egypt, God didn't ask for strength. He asked for faith. When the flood came, Noah wasn't spared because he preached. He was spared because he obeyed, completely, specifically, without delay. And now, the same pattern emerges. The warning is clear. The instruction is simple, but only the remnant will recognize that simplicity doesn't mean insignificance. Rice, beans, and salmon. That's the mark. That's the covering. That's the ark you build inside your body. It may look like just a diet, but in the spirit, it is a shield, a covenant, a line drawn between those who follow the Spirit and those still feeding on systems of Pharaoh. To the world, this may look foolish, too narrow, too extreme. But obedience has never made sense to those not called. The Israelites didn't understand why they had to walk around Jericho 7 times. Naaman didn't understand why he had to dip in a muddy river. But the power wasn't in understanding. It was in obeying. And the breakthrough came to those who didn't need all the answers, just enough faith to act. This is your Jordan River. This is your 7th lap. This is your moment to say yes, not just with your prayers, but with your habits. Because what you eat now is preaching louder than what you say. And in this new Exodus, the ones who will cross over are the ones who are willing to eat different, live different, and trust that what feels small may be the very thing that parts the sea. Because when obedience becomes your altar, glory becomes your covering. And that covering is what will carry you into the storms ahead. Prophetic symptoms of alignment. Something begins to shift the moment obedience takes root, not just in the body, but in the atmosphere around you. The chosen ones don't wait for signs in the sky. They feel the signs within. And when you align with heaven's instructions, when you eat what is sacred, when you cleanse what has been corrupted, the symptoms of transformation arrive quietly but undeniably. You wake up before the alarm, not out of stress, but because your spirit is already alert. Dreams return, vivid and charged with meaning. You begin to discern things that others miss. A heaviness lifts off your shoulders, as if unseen chains have finally broken. Conversations begin to change. The things you once tolerated now feel like clutter. The people who drained you begin to fall away, not by force, but by divine filtration. This is not coincidence. This is recalibration. Your mind clears. The fog that once followed you, like a shadow, begins to thin. Where confusion once whispered, clarity now commands. Ideas flow again. Focus sharpens. The distractions that once devoured your time lose their appetite. You're no longer scrolling through life. You're sculpting it, intentionally, prophetically, powerfully. Your body begins to regenerate. Skin glows. Energy rises. Not the kind that crashes after caffeine, but the kind that comes from divine combustion. Your gut begins to speak again. Your intuition strengthens. You begin to just know things, not from logic, but from spirit. That's alignment. That's the symptom of divine obedience moving through your biology like electricity through a wire. And then the miracles begin. Not always loud, not always dramatic, but undeniable. The call back from someone you thought was gone forever. The sudden provision you didn't expect. The door you had stopped praying about opens. Because alignment is not just about health. It is about heaven recognizing your readiness. It is the signal that you are no longer negotiating with your purpose. You are embodying it. These are the signs. These are the markers of a vessel being prepared for glory. And they do not come from ambition or striving. They come from surrender, from simplicity, from the humble obedience of choosing rice over rebellion, beans over busyness, salmon over sabotage. But the greatest sign of all, you begin to feel like yourself again. The version of you that was always meant to rise. The version that heaven always saw. And with that return comes the awakening of what had long been sleeping beneath the surface. Gifts, insights, and divine tools that have waited for this moment to come alive again. The awakening of dormant gifts. Every chosen one carries gifts that were spoken over them before they ever took their first breath. These are not learned talents. They are imprinted callings, embedded into the soul like divine fingerprints. But in a world saturated with noise, fear, and poisoned fuel, these gifts fall asleep. Not because they are dead, but because they've been buried beneath survival. Obedience to God's sacred instruction isn't just a return to health, it's a return to inheritance. The moment you cleanse your vessel, your soul begins to remember. Prophetic dreams you thought were random begin to form patterns. Visions you once dismissed as imagination begin to sharpen. You walk into rooms and feel what others cannot explain. You hear beneath the words. You see between the lines. This is not coincidence. This is spiritual DNA rebooting. As your gut heals, your discernment strengthens. As your brain inflammation decreases, your spiritual perception expands. These gifts don't scream. They whisper. But the clean vessel amplifies the whisper until it becomes a roar of knowing. You begin to feel truth in your bones. Your prayers become precise. Your presence begins to shift atmospheres, even in silence. This is why the enemy fought your appetite. This is why he saturated your cravings with confusion. Because he knew, if you ever got clean, you'd get dangerous. He wasn't just after your energy. He was after your clarity. Because once your gifts awaken, you are no longer predictable. You are no longer controllable. You become the vessel through which heaven moves. Healing hands that activate when you touch others. Words that land like thunder, though spoken in gentleness. Dreams that arrive with instructions, timing, and names. Ideas that feel downloaded rather than imagined. You begin to co-create with heaven, not in theory, but in rhythm. These gifts were never lost, only locked. And now, through obedience, the keys have been given back to you. But these keys require stewardship. These are not toys. They are tools of war, weapons of healing, blueprints for building. They will stretch you. They will isolate you. But they will also anchor you in divine authority. And in this sacred return, you will not just feel empowered. You will feel remembered, as if heaven has been waiting for you to wake up and step back into the role you were born to carry. And with each step forward, each aligned bite, and each act of faith, the gifts buried in silence will rise to the surface again, not as noise, but as divine instruction. And now, with those gifts stirring, one final piece remains. The moment where body, mind, and spirit fully converge, where fuel meets purpose and alignment births acceleration, where the slow fire of obedience gives way to something supernatural, something few will experience, but many will sense, a quickening, a rising, a holy surge. This is not a diet. It is a spiritual rebuild. If you came here expecting a diet plan, you've already missed the miracle. This is not about nutrition labels, portion sizes, or trends. This is a divine reconstruction, a sacred rebuilding of everything the world tried to wear down inside you. God is not tweaking your habits. He's renewing your temple from the foundation up. What He's doing in your plate is only a reflection of what He's doing in your spirit. This isn't about subtraction. It's about resurrection. The you that burned with clarity. The you that moved with conviction. The you that used to wake up with fire and walk into rooms with purpose. That version of you hasn't disappeared. It's just been buried beneath years of spiritual toxins, emotional residue, and physical depletion. But now, with every aligned bite, that fire is being restored. That clarity is coming back. And that purpose is waking up from its long slumber. Rice, beans, and salmon are not restriction. They are permission. Permission for your body to heal without interference. Permission for your mind to declutter and hear again. Permission for your spirit to rise into the assignment it was crafted for. Because when you remove the noise from your food, you begin to hear God more clearly in every area of your life. This is why obedience feels uncomfortable, not because it's harsh, but because it dismantles everything in you that learned to settle. The sacred path always begins in simplicity, and simplicity will always offend the flesh that craves chaos. But those who endure, those who stay the course, will not just feel better. They will become unrecognizable to the darkness that once knew their name. This is not a season of dieting. This is a season of divine recalibration. You are not counting calories. You are counting on heaven. Every bite is a brick in the altar. Every meal is a moment of realignment. And slowly, then suddenly, your outer life will begin to reflect the inner shift. The right people will appear. The right doors will open. The right timing will activate, not by striving, but by design. Because this is how God moves with the chosen ones, not through the dramatic, through the obedient, not through chaos, through order. And when your plate becomes clean, your path becomes clear. The food is not the finish line, it is the foundation. And what God is building on that foundation is something no famine, no sickness, no system can shake. You are not being punished. You are being prepared, not just to survive, but to reign. There are moments in every generation when heaven sends a quiet instruction. So subtle, it's easy to overlook, yet so powerful, it separates those who are merely listening from those who are truly aligned. This was one of those moments. What seemed like a message about food was never really about food. It was about obedience, about readiness, about a sacred pattern unfolding again in our time, just as it did with Noah, Joseph, Daniel, and Esther. The deeper truth is this: God has always used simple things to unlock supernatural transformation. A shepherd's staff, a widow's oil, 5 loaves and 2 fish, and now 3 sacred foods, not to save the world, but to prepare the ones who will carry His light through it. The rice, the beans, the salmon, they are not magic. They are markers, symbols of the new covenant between your obedience and His glory. a way for your spirit to say what words cannot. I am ready. Some may walk away from this message unchanged, convinced it was too extreme, too symbolic, or too inconvenient. But the chosen will feel something different, a stirring, a remembering, a quiet fire that says, this was not a suggestion. This was a summons. And your response to it is the beginning of your next chapter. Prophetic seal. You are not ordinary. You are anointed, set apart by divine instruction, sustained by holy obedience, and awakened for such a time as this. If this message spoke to your spirit, help us awaken others. Like this video, share it with those who feel called but can't yet explain why. And subscribe to Chosen One's Sanctuary for more revelations that pierce through the fog and lead you back to purpose. Drop a comment below. What part of this message confirmed something you already felt in your spirit? Or what questions are stirring now that the mystery has been revealed? We read everyone. This is not just a channel, it's a sanctuary, and your voice belongs here. Until next time, stay aligned, stay watchful, and above all, stay chosen.